The camera pans across the familiar courtroom as the murmurs of the small audience fade into silence. The doors swing open, and in walks a woman dressed in a sleek designer suit, sunglasses perched on her head, her posture sharp and confident. She's the kind of person who radiates control, the type who walks into a room already believing she owns it. Her name, the bailiff announces, is Karen Hastings, CEO of a small but wealthy boutique tech firm. Her opponent, a former employee named Rachel, stands quietly on the other side of the courtroom, clutching a folder of documents to her chest. Judge Judy adjusts her glasses, her expression neutral but alert. She's seen this posture before, the self-proclaimed untouchable who thinks their title earns them immunity from basic decency. She glances at the paperwork before her, then looks up at Karen. Ms. Hastings, she begins in that sharp, measured tone that can slice through arrogance like a blade, you're being sued by your former employee for unpaid wages and breach of contract. Is that correct? Karen crosses her legs, flashing a rehearsed smile. That's technically what she's claiming, Your Honor, she replies smoothly. But this is all a misunderstanding. My company has policies, very strict ones, and she simply didn't meet the requirements to earn her final check. I don't see why we're even wasting time here. Judge Judy raises an eyebrow. You don't see why we're wasting time? You're in my courtroom. I'll decide what's a waste of time. The audience chuckles softly. Karen's smile falters for just a moment before she recovers. Of course, Your Honor, she says, her tone now coated with polite resistance. Rachel steps forward slightly, her voice trembling at first but steadying as she speaks. Your Honor, I worked for Ms. Hastings for 8 months. I was promised commissions that were never paid. When I brought it up, she told me the company didn't owe me anything because she decided to change the policy. Judge Judy turns her gaze to Karen. Did you change the policy? Karen shrugs. Well, yes, but that's my right as CEO. It's my company. I make the rules. And the rules changed. Judy's eyes narrow. When did you make this change? 2 days after she left, Karen replies quickly, then catches herself. 2 days before her final day. I sent out an internal memo. Rachel shakes her head. There was no memo. Everyone found out only when I asked about my commission. The judge taps her pen on the desk, her patience thinning. Ms. Hastings, you can't just retroactively change company policy to avoid paying someone what they earned. That's not how employment works. Karen exhales sharply, frustration flickering across her face. With respect, Your Honor, I think you're misunderstanding how corporate leadership works. When you're running a company, you have to make quick decisions. Sometimes the rules don't apply in the same way they do for regular employees. The courtroom goes quiet. Judge Judy's eyebrows lift just slightly. The rules don't apply to you, she repeats slowly, each word landing like a hammer. Karen realizes she stepped into dangerous territory but doubles down anyway, her tone defensive and condescending. What I mean is, as the CEO, I operate under a different set of expectations. My role gives me discretion. I don't have to follow the same standard policies as everyone else. Judge Judy leans forward, her gaze piercing. Let me make something perfectly clear to you, Ms. Hastings. In my courtroom, you're not a CEO. You're not above anyone. You're a litigant, just like everyone else who sits in that chair. And here, the rules absolutely do apply to you. A few people in the audience nod, smirking as they sense the tension building. Karen's polished demeanor begins to crack, her jaw tightening. Your Honor, with all due respect, you don't understand the demands of my position. I oversee millions of dollars in projects. I make decisions that impact hundreds of employees. I don't have time to deal with minor clerical oversights. Minor clerical oversights? Judge Judy repeats, her voice rising. You failed to pay someone what they earned. That's not a clerical oversight, that's wage theft. Karen flinches but tries to keep her composure. Wage theft? That's a strong accusation. My company has impeccable records. Then produce them, Judy snaps. Let's see the documentation. Karen looks at her assistant, who's seated behind her, but the woman avoids eye contact. Karen's confidence wavers. I didn't bring those files today, she stammers. They're confidential corporate materials. Judy leans back in her chair, unimpressed. So you came to court, accused your former employee of being unworthy of her pay, and didn't bring a single piece of evidence to prove your claim? Karen straightens her back, regaining some of her icy tone. I didn't think it would come to this level of scrutiny, Your Honor. I thought my word as CEO would carry some weight. The audience bursts into soft laughter. Judge Judy doesn't smile. Your word doesn't carry any more weight than hers. You're not special because you sit behind a fancy desk. Karen's nostrils flare. I built my company from nothing. I've earned the right to make decisions without being second-guessed by people who don't understand business. Judge Judy folds her hands neatly on the desk. And I've spent decades dealing with people who think power gives them permission to break the rules. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. But you will be corrected. Rachel takes a small step forward, encouraged by Judy's words. Your Honor, I have emails from Ms. Hastings promising the commission payment after a successful project. I've printed them here. She hands the papers to the bailiff, who brings them to the bench. Judy reads the documents silently for a few moments, her expression unreadable. Then she looks up. This email clearly states that you, Ms. Hastings, agreed to pay her 10% of the final deal value as commission. Karen crosses her arms. That was before the policy update. Which, according to your own testimony, happened after she earned it, Judy reminds her. Karen opens her mouth but no sound comes out. Judge Judy nods. That's what I thought. She sets the papers down and fixes Karen with a cold stare. You know what your problem is, Ms. Hastings? You've spent too much time surrounded by people who say yes to you. You've forgotten that authority is not immunity. You don't get to decide when the law applies. Karen's lips tighten into a thin line. Your Honor, No, Judy interrupts. You're done talking for a moment. The room falls completely silent. The sound of the pen tapping stops. Judy's voice lowers but gains force with every word. You walked in here thinking your title would intimidate me. You thought your money, your company, your status made you untouchable. But in this courtroom, we deal in facts, not ego. Karen's expression hardens. She sits motionless, the silence stretching uncomfortably long. Judge Judy looks to Rachel. You worked hard. You did your job. You were promised payment and denied it out of convenience. That's unacceptable. Rachel nods, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, Your Honor. Karen shifts in her seat, suddenly less sure of herself. May I respond? She asks, her tone softer now. Judy gestures for her to proceed. Karen clears her throat. Your Honor, I realize how this might look. But I'm a businesswoman. I have to protect my company. Sometimes that means making hard choices that not everyone understands. Judy's tone stays calm but sharp. There's a difference between making hard choices and making unfair ones. Protecting your company doesn't mean exploiting your employees. Karen hesitates, her confidence draining faster than she can rebuild it. I didn't mean to exploit anyone. Maybe I was just too focused on the bigger picture. Then you should have hired someone to handle the smaller picture, Judy retorts. Because the law doesn't vanish when it becomes inconvenient. The audience hums with quiet approval. Judy looks back at Rachel. You said she also withheld your recommendation letter? Rachel nods. Yes, Your Honor. She told me she wouldn't write it unless I stopped asking about my commission. Judy's eyes narrow. So she tried to coerce you into silence. Lovely. Karen quickly interjects. That's not true. I just didn't think she deserved a recommendation after causing trouble for the company. Judy's voice cuts through the room like thunder. She caused trouble because she asked to be paid. That's not trouble, that's integrity. Karen's mouth opens but closes again when she sees Judy's expression. The silence after the outburst is heavy, almost tangible. Judy exhales slowly, regaining her composure. Ms. Hastings, I suggest you start remembering what fairness looks like. Because arrogance will not serve you here. Karen lowers her eyes. For the first time, she seems genuinely unsure of herself. Judy nods slightly, then turns to Rachel. I'm going to take a short recess before giving my final ruling. You've both given me enough to think about. As the camera pans out, the audience whispers in anticipation. Karen sits frozen, her earlier confidence replaced by visible tension. Rachel exhales shakily, her relief palpable. Judge Judy rises from her bench, gives Karen one last, unreadable look, and exits the courtroom. The air feels thick with unspoken judgment, the kind that lingers long before the verdict is read. Karen glances at her assistant, who quietly gathers her things, avoiding eye contact. For the first time, the CEO who claimed rules don't apply to me looks like someone realizing she may have finally met a rule she can't bend. The murmurs fade as the screen slowly darkens, leaving only the echo of Judge Judy's voice still hanging in the air, calm, certain, and unyielding. The courtroom doors creak open again as everyone rises. Judge Judy returns to the bench, her expression composed yet sharp enough to slice through the thick tension hanging in the air. The murmur of the audience dies instantly. Karen, sitting stiffly in her chair, straightens her blazer and forces a shallow breath. Her earlier confidence has evaporated, replaced by a mask of fragile poise. Rachel, sitting quietly at the opposite table, looks both nervous and hopeful, clutching her folder like a shield. Be seated, Judge Judy commands. Her voice, steady and commanding, fills the space. She flips through her notes, the sound of paper turning echoing in the stillness. I've reviewed everything both of you have said. I've looked at the documentation Ms. Rachel provided and the lack thereof from Ms. Hastings. Karen's eyes dart nervously, trying to read the judge's face, but Judy's expression remains impenetrable. Judy continues, Ms. Hastings, I want to make something perfectly clear before I render my decision. You came in here treating this case like a nuisance, as if you were too important to answer for your actions. You believed your position as CEO made you immune to the rules that bind everyone else. Karen opens her mouth slightly but stops herself when Judy raises a hand. You said, and I quote, that rules don't apply to me. That single sentence told me everything I needed to know about how you run your business and how you view the people who work for you. Let me tell you something, Ms. Hastings. Titles don't make you untouchable. They don't give you the right to rewrite fairness. The audience leans forward. Karen swallows hard, her facade cracking further. Your Honor, if I may. No, you may not, Judy interrupts sharply. You've done plenty of talking, and most of it dug your hole deeper. You claim to be a leader, but leadership without accountability is just arrogance wrapped in a title. Karen's assistant shifts uncomfortably behind her, glancing toward the exit. Judy picks up the papers Rachel submitted and holds them up. These emails, your own words, promise Rachel a commission based on performance. There is no mention of any revised policy, no signed agreement stating the terms changed. That means the original agreement stands. Karen bites her lip, her jaw tense. Your Honor, I didn't mean to withhold payment out of malice. I just... Judy cuts in again, voice cold and precise. You didn't mean to? Ms. Hastings, intent doesn't erase impact. You deliberately withheld money someone earned. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a choice. A very poor one. Rachel watches quietly, her fingers trembling against the table. Judy glances at her before continuing. I've spent decades watching people justify bad behavior with titles, excuses, and inflated egos. But justice doesn't bend for power. It never has, and it never will. The room is silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the courtroom clock. Karen's breathing quickens slightly. She opens her mouth again, but her voice wavers. Your Honor, I was only trying to protect my company's finances. The project was already over budget. I couldn't justify another payout. Judy's tone sharpens. Then perhaps you should have adjusted the budget before making promises you couldn't keep. You can't dangle rewards in front of people to motivate them and then snatch them away when it's inconvenient. Karen's expression crumbles further, the steel in her posture melting into something close to remorse. I didn't realize it looked that way. I just thought. You thought the rules didn't apply to you, Judy finishes for her. That's the heart of the problem. You thought leadership meant exemption, not example. Karen's shoulders slump slightly. For the first time since she walked in, she looks less like a corporate titan and more like a person being forced to confront the truth about herself. Judy leans forward. Let me ask you something. Do you think your employees respect you? Karen blinks, caught off guard. Of course they do. I'm demanding, but fair. Fair? Judy repeats, her tone dripping with irony. You call it fair to change the rules after the fact? You call it fair to punish someone for expecting honesty? Karen's face reddens. She stares down at her hands, suddenly speechless. Judy's tone softens slightly, not gentle, but less sharp. You know, Ms. Hastings, I've dealt with plenty of people like you, people who confuse authority with superiority. But the truth is, the higher you climb, the more integrity you should have. Because power without integrity is just greed in a nicer suit. The audience murmurs softly, a wave of quiet agreement spreading through the room. Karen blinks rapidly, her composure cracking completely now. I never meant to hurt anyone, she says quietly, almost to herself. Rachel looks over, a mix of empathy and exhaustion in her eyes. All I ever wanted was what I earned, she says gently. Judy nods, her gaze shifting back to Karen. And that's all she's going to get, what she earned. You're ordered to pay Rachel the full commission amount, plus the filing costs for this case. Payment is due immediately. Karen exhales shakily. Understood, Your Honor. Judy tilts her head slightly. I hope you do. And I hope you take this as a lesson, because not everyone you wrong will take you to court. Some people will just quit quietly, and your company will rot from the inside out while you sit in your office wondering what went wrong. Karen's eyes glisten, though she quickly blinks it away. I understand, she repeats, this time with a tremor in her voice. Rachel breathes out a long sigh of relief. Thank you, Your Honor. Judy gives her a firm nod. You earned it. Then, turning back to Karen, she adds, and as for you, Ms. Hastings, next time you think about changing the rules, remember that even CEOs have someone they have to answer to. Today, it's me. Tomorrow, it'll be the consequences of your choices. The gavel slams down, sharp and final. Case closed. The sound echoes through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Karen remained seated for a moment, staring down at the polished table, her reflection looking back at her. The woman who walked in proud, untouchable, and certain of her power now looked small, her confidence hollowed out by truth. Her assistant places a hesitant hand on her shoulder, whispering something inaudible. Rachel gathers her papers and turns to leave. As she passes by, she glances at Karen. For a brief moment, their eyes meet, one filled with quiet vindication, the other with the heavy realization of what arrogance costs. Outside the courtroom, reporters wait, microphones ready, sensing the story. But Rachel doesn't stop to talk. She walks past them with her head high, her sense of dignity restored. Inside, Karen lingers. She stands slowly, smoothing her blazer as if the motion might somehow piece her confidence back together. She looks toward the empty bench where Judge Judy sat moments ago, her voice barely a whisper. Rules apply to everyone, even me. Her assistant nods quietly, saying nothing. Together, they walk toward the exit, the echo of their footsteps fading behind them. Later that week, in her glass-walled office, Karen stares out at the city skyline. Her desk is covered in reports, but her eyes are fixed on nothing. The words from that courtroom replay in her head like an echo she can't shut off. Power without integrity is just greed in a nicer suit. She picks up her phone, hesitates, then dials. Rachel? It's Karen. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I was wrong. You didn't deserve that. On the other end of the line, there's a long pause, then a calm voice replies, thank you. That means a lot. Karen exhales, the tension she's carried for weeks slowly melting away. I'm trying to change how I lead. Maybe it's too late for us to work together again, but I wanted you to know that. Rachel smiles softly to herself. Change starts somewhere. When the call ends, Karen sets the phone down and stares at it for a long moment. Outside her window, the city hums with life, cars, people, 1,000 stories moving all at once. For the first time in a long while, she feels small in a good way. Human. Accountable. Back in the courtroom, Judge Judy finishes signing off on her last case of the day. She leans back in her chair and sighs. The bailiff looks at her curiously. That one got to you a little, huh? Judy smiles faintly. They all get to me, one way or another. But that one, she'll remember it. Some people only learn when their reflection talks back. The bailiff chuckles. And you sure made that reflection talk. Judy's smile widens just a bit. That's the job. She closes her notebook, the sound of its cover snapping shut marking the end, not just of the case, but of a lesson learned. Meanwhile, Karen Hastings, once the CEO who claimed rules didn't apply to her, now begins to understand that the very thing she tried to escape is what makes fairness possible. And though her ego took the biggest loss of all, the truth is, she gained something she didn't realize she needed: humility. In the end, the story isn't about a CEO or an employee. It's about accountability, about learning that respect isn't earned by power, but by principle. And somewhere in that quiet realization, Karen finally sees what Judge Judy knew all along: no one, no matter how high they climb, stands above the rules.